All right, so I'm analyzing Christian's dice roller program that I took from him, which is in the Pseudo Code example.txt file, which is on, this is for the people who aren't here, by the way. So you can find this on Canvas, but all I'm trying to do is take that code and decode it into pseudocode. So I just want to know what's happening here. So my first line is int sides equals 10. What's that thing do? What did you guys write for that?
Defines an integer called sides.
Nice. So our first task is going to be to define an integer called sides.
Give it a starting value of 10.
Start it at 10. Another reasonable way to say that is to use the computer science word for start it, which would be initialize. Yeah, so set sides equal to 10 would be an option. Initialize sides at 10 would be another option. I'm doing kind of dum-dum level pseudocode here, so I'm going to call start it at 10. Okay? It's important that your pseudocode include the variable names. The reason for including your variable names is that when somebody's trying to help you, it really helps if your pseudocode has the variable names in it and that they're the same as the names in the code. So that I can be like, wait, what was this sides variable supposed to do? And then I can look at the pseudocode and be like, oh yeah, it was just supposed to be the number of sides for the die, right? And I can look in the program and make sure the only spot sides shows up is in reference to the number of sides that the die has. You guys see that? I would also probably add that note to my pseudocode because that's kind of how my brain works. I would say sides, which I'm going to think about as the number of sides for the die. Cool.
Are there programmers who will just call it that by some letter? And
Sure,
plug it
and
in?
they're jerks.
What?
Categorically, they're jerks.
Okay.
And I'm looking at Story and his early code for that one.
Okay,
Because if you just name stuff, like if you name your variables A, B, C,
Yeah.
D, E, all the way through in order,
Yeah.
it's impossible to decode.
What about out of?
Out of order is even worse.
That's
Naming
awesome.
the misleading things is the worst possible thing to do.
Oh man.
And occasionally this got used as job security. Like back at the beginning, when there were lots of like firms that hired one guy who learned computer coding at that firm, like sometimes that guy has a notebook. And in the notebook is what all the variables names actually are and what they do. And that's a total like scam job security thing. That's really bad coding. Because, you know, he knows that A is supposed to be the COM port that the server uses to communicate with something, right? Other people don't know that. So when they go to debug his code, they're like, what is A? Like, what kind of object is this even? So they have to go find the variable declaration, even to know what sort of thing it is, much less what it actually does, right? So in big, long programs, it's really crucial that your variable names be at least a little bit descriptive of kind of what they do.
And searching for A is useless.
Yeah, and you also can't search in your code for A, right? You can search for sides.
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to appear so many times. What was the thing you and I just talked about, Christian? Or Chris, sorry.
I don't remember.
In your bubbles program? What was I just complaining about? The radius thing.
Yes, yeah.
So Chris wrote this really great bubbles program that's a like really fun like little clicking game, right? But he called one of his variables radius. And then he declared an ellipse at some point, comma radius, right? But the way the processing language takes those two arguments, they're the diameters. right? So that's what I would call a categorically misleading variable name. So please try to avoid that if possible.
I named one blue and put it exclusively in the red color.
That's another great example of a do not do this coding practice. All right, so what else did I have? Sorry, back to my example. Variable naming conventions aside. I declared an integer of sides and I set it equal to 10. Where does that live in your code? This is another thing I saw a couple of you do, but not all of you do in your pseudocode. Like, what kind of place is integer sides equal 10 living in?
Global setup.
Yeah, that's in that global variable setup. So I would put that up here. Like, I'm just thinking that's the global place, right? In the global place, I'm doing that one thing. In the, what's your next place in this code? You have another method or another block of code, or yeah, there's a setup method in there, right? So I'm kind of thinking, in processing at least, it's important that I have a setup method, right? What's happening in your setup method?
Setting the window size and turning on no loop.
Yeah, we're just setting the window size. And we're setting that to 500, 500. You guys cool with this? This is a very processing specific line of pseudocode. Like, the fact that I've put this under a setup header is a really processing specific thing. If I wanted to write more global pseudocode, I would probably kind of ignore that and just put a, like, this is a thing I need to do. You guys kind of see that? Okay. There's also a no loop in there. What's the no loop actually do?
Stops the draw method from going over and over and over again.
Yeah, so there's also a stop draw at one execution. Right? And if I'm writing pseudocode for myself, I might just kind of note off in the margin what I intend to, like how I intend to do that. You guys with me on this? Okay. What's your next method or block of code going?
Draw.
Gonna draw. Okay, and in my draw, what do I have happening?
Setting the background.
Okay.
Rolling between sides and sides plus one.
Background went gray. And then this is a line that's going to be a little bit interesting in pseudocode land, right? So this is int roll equals int random between 1 and sides plus 1. Okay, so fundamentally, what's the first thing that's doing?
Making an integer called roll.
Yeah. Make an integer called roll. You guys notice I'm underlining variable names? That's so I can find them later. Okay. All right, what else have I got? What am I doing with the integer called roll?
Randomizing it between 1 and sides plus 1.
Initialize roll to, and then this is weird because it's not actually a random number between 1 and sides plus 1, right? What is it? Yeah, so what I've got going here is I'm initializing roll to a random integer between 1 and sides.
You really need sides. We could just get rid of sides and have a left.
Kinda, yeah. So I kind of soft coded sides, right? I declared that up at the top, and then I went through and I only actually used it once. So it's probably a waste of time to have declared that as a global variable, right? If I wanted to do good coding practice, this is what I would do.
In
Okay,
case
with
we
me on
use
that?
sides more than once.
Yeah, if I'm going to maybe expand on this program later and call sides a bunch of times, then I'd like to have that kind of soft coded at the beginning so I don't have to go through and change each hard coded version.
Makes sense.
That's sort of a personal choice. In this case, you're only using it once. It's probably fine to put in a number 10 down.
It's just if later on if you want to change the sides, you can change the variable and it changes everything else.
Yeah, that's what I would vote for. Like, I would say that good coding practice is important, specifically so that you can steal your own code from yourself later. Right? Your future self might want to borrow code from your past self. And if your past self has done you a favor and done nice things like declaring your global variables with meaningful names, right, and then using them in nice ways, I am staring at you. Because your future self will go look at those first couple programs you wrote and be like, this is cool! What the shit was I doing? Why is blue only affecting red? Okay, so how you actually get a random integer between 1 and sides is not something that the pseudocode explores. You guys see that? Like, how that actually happens is not a pseudocode level thing. How you actually set the window size is not a pseudocode thing. Even me including this thought about having no loop, that's not really an honest-to-God pseudocode thing. That's just a like personal reminder to myself. You guys pull that? Let's see, what else do we have happening in the draw method?
Text size and line.
Yeah, so there's like set some text stuff. Make text look nice. What else you got in there?
To run the roll.
Text print roll.
Yeah, so there's actually a kind of a printout of the roll, and that's happening at, like, I don't know. I'm just going to call that print result. Oh, I probably should just call that print roll, right?
And sides.
Oh, thank you. And this underlining thing is also not universal convention. This is just something I do to write good pseudocode for myself. Cool. All right, what else you got? So we set the background to gray, we made a roll, then we actually rolled it, right? Then we made some text look nice, then we printed the roll. Then what else is going on in my program here?
If you click the mouse, it re-rolls it.
Yeah, there's a mouse press. So if we press the mouse, what do we want it to do?
Do it again.
Yeah, we want to draw again.
Draw and randomly.
Yeah, so when I say draw again, right, I'm thinking call the draw method, right, which has inside it that random. You guys see that? Questions? Okay, now there's a processing specific thing here, which is that if you go into that void mouse press and you try to call the draw method, what happens? I learned this myself today.
Oh.
Absolutely nothing. So if you, and this is a processing syntax thing, right? So if you, over here, truncate that instead of calling it redraw, if you call draw, right, which should run the draw method again, right? But one of the quirks of processing is that it will not let you call the draw method again. It doesn't allow you to call that method. It's called automatically, and it will not allow you to manually call it. It just ignores that line. It doesn't even yell at you. It just doesn't do it.
So if we had a void roll and we programmed a roll in there,
Yep.
and then we had mouse press and then called the roll again, then it would redo it.
Yeah.
But draw specifically, because it has a redraw, and if I typed in re-roll, that wouldn't be a thing. It wouldn't know what to do with that.
Yeah, that's a very specific method to processing that you can get the draw method to happen again. The only way you can do that is by calling the redraw method. And that is a very specific processing word.
Is reset up a thing?
I have no idea. Probably not. Another option for this, right, is you don't have to use the redraw command to call that draw method again. You could just turn the no loop on again, right? So there's more than one way to get it to do the idea of draw again. A couple of you guys I've seen put you hit the end of this and then you have like some boolean that turns no loop on. And then when you mouse press, it turns no loop off, or it turns loop on. And then when it runs through and randomizes, it turns no loop on again and resets the boolean. Like I've seen a couple of you guys do little hacks like that. And it's totally fine. There's way more than one way to get it to do the draw again, which is why this is pseudocode and not actually code. You guys kind of with me on that? Okay, cool. Furthermore, most of this pseudocode should go where? Into the comments in your code, especially if you're writing something bigger.
Yeah.
Right? Anytime you get past about one screen's width of code, you really should have a lot of comments in it. And mostly that's for you later.
Yep.
Cool?